Right now I'm going to take you through a song called Another Hallelujah, and this is actually a really exciting thing for me because this song is a song that was written by a guy named Leonard Cohen, and being a worship pastor at a church, as I listened to the original lyrics, I kind of went, well, they don't really work for the environment that I play in most of the time. So I just started singing new lyrics, and so I came up with a couple of new verses for this song, and we recorded it the night that we did the All To You Live project. I wasn't sure if we were going to be able to use this song or not, so we actually had to ask Leonard Cohen for permission, and to my absolute amazement, he gave us permission to use it, but they said you had to call it Another Hallelujah, so that's why it's named that. So you probably recognize this song. It was also covered by Rufus Wainwright and Jeff Buckley. So very, very cool song, and we had a really great night with this. Really great time with this song when we played it that live night. So I want to take you through my approach to the solo at the end of this song. And more than teaching you a note-for-note approach to this solo, I want to just take you through the general essence of why this solo's in the song and the different things that I did to make it fit into the song the way that it does. So we're going to start with some of the techniques, just a kind of a quick recap on some of the techniques that we talked about in the techniques portion of this volume. And some of these techniques are a little more on the advanced edge, and I'll cover these a little more in depth on volume 2, but for right now, you'll at least be able to see what I'm doing and get a little better picture of how this solo comes together. The solo starts, when we listen to the song in context, it starts when the song is really peaking, so it's at the end of the song, so it's gone through 2 full choruses, and then it's just and kind of an all-in where people are singing, really going for it, and then I switch from singing lead to just diving in and using this as a voice rather than my actual voice. So it starts off with this high bend, and this might seem kind of counter to some of the other solos that we've looked at, but actually I think sometimes starting a solo up here can be a really gripping feel. So we're rolling through the rhythm part. The solo starts, and I thought is the very first thing in the solo, and you'll notice I'm doing something there where I'm actually grabbing more than one string. So sometimes that'll happen when you bend. You'll get that G will slide in there, and or if you're up on the E, the B will slide in there, and you can grab that, and you can either hit one of them or you can hit them both and really get kind of a cool sound. This has a good, angst to it. So that's how I started that solo with that. And every once in a while, that G string will slide in there. And then I do a. And what that is I'm going up to the 2. And so I call kind of the scale I use a lot, blues with 2s. So it's really a blues scale. So I'm in the key of C or A minor, basically the same thing. It just depends on what note you end on. But so it's a pentatonic scale. Minor third, so 1, minor 3, 4, 5. And then all the blues scale is you add the flat 5. Flat 5 again. So that's the blues scale, and then the 2 would obviously be the second note. So I'll do that thing again that I call blues with 2s. It just adds a little different flavor to it. So and that technique there, slowed down, is so if you watch my pick, it's downstroke, it's alternate picking, and then we're going to do another technique, and you can do it with these 2 fingers, or you can do it with these 2 fingers. But it's basically a series of hammer-ons, pull-offs, and alternate picking to get this feel. it's a little, actually it's a little tough to slow it down too much, but so. And you can do it by using less alternate picking in the beginning. That, or you can do. So between a combination of those two, you can get a pretty cool thing just by going back and forth. So starting that solo with that bend again, or getting that G in there. And then we're going to do like a walk down that's going to start on a 2. So it's basically this phrase. So those are pull-offs. But rather than starting it on the minor third, we're going to start it on the 2. So rather than starting that lick on the minor third, we're actually just going to start it on the 2, and you'll notice that gives the whole lick just a different flavor of sound. So rather than doing and so let me take you through that real slow, just note by note. The great thing about this type of lick is you can use it in any song at a different tempo or in a different key. Say we're playing in B minor. Or in E minor. So there's a lot of variety to it. So again, like I said in the beginning, I'm just going to teach you the general essences where you can plug these licks in, which is kind of what I did with this song. So, and I think probably when I play this song live, I probably play this solo different every time I do it. We just happen to like the take that we got on the live night, so that's the one that you hear on the recording. So again, that walk down. So let me put those 4 techniques together, starting with that bend. Kind of do that walk down. It's probably a little bit different than what we were just breaking down slowly. I just walked it down a little bit further. Little bend there. That's a good example of a bend that's, again, pulling the string down to make it go up using that fulcrum pivot on my left hand. So you can just practice that technique, walking it down. That's a cool thing too, you can repeat that phrase right there. And then just make these all your own. So and the second part of this solo, we kind of bring it down to this range here. And again, I'll cover more of this in volume 2, but how to link the neck together in 3 different positions primarily, where you can kind of just go all the way down and all the way back up in the same key pretty seamlessly. So we're in A minor here. And I do some low bends also right there. So and then this is actually a lick that I've been playing for years. Again, starts on the 2, but one more time on that. So you can see it incorporates a lot of different things, some bending, some vibrato. Again, this is a lick you can use all over the place. You can use it in a variety of different types of songs. You could be playing Here I Am to Worship and doing... And it fits in. It's a very melodic. You can play it a little slower, a little cleaner. Or you can do it like I used it in this song, which was much more aggressive. Do it a little bit faster with a little bit more picking. Then we're going to jump down to this this other range here that I was talking about. So we're going to play still in A blues, A minor. But we're going to do it down in this range of the neck, closer to the 12th fret. So there's some patterns down here that I know that I can kind of depend on. But so much of the solo revolves around using that deep vibrato, just a lot of intensity, and those bends that we talked about in the technique section. And really digging in. Even the rake strokes that I showed you in Everlasting God, just really those double string grabs. I love doing that bend right there. This is a cool bluesy lick. And just you're pushing up, kind of using those bones to lock together in your finger and just rotate. Instead of pulling down, you rotate your finger up that way. And this will make your skin a little bit sore, but you'll get some calluses over time that'll make this a lot less painful to do. So, and then pulling down, using that fulcrum pivot. Let me break that part of the lick down slowly. That's one way to do it. And again, you can just slow these down and figure out what makes sense to you. There's no right or wrong way to play blues. It's just whatever feels right. Sometimes I'll throw that lick in on high E. And then I talked about those like bends that are slightly out of tune. This is a song that really you can use those in just to create a nice emotion. Instead of going... Maybe you're going down a quarter step instead. That's kind of cool. Okay, so continuing on with the Another Hallelujah solo, I do a riff that kind of brings me back up in register, so that's about as low as I get. And this one has a little slide figure that's kind of a nice blues thing you can do. So you're just going to slide. Now you can play this lick using a hammer-on and a pull-off with your pinky, but I like the sound of it better using a slide. So hammer-on with the pinky sounds like this. But I like it a lot better this way. And then you take your index and maybe bend that note out of tune just a little bit so it just has a little more flavor, a little more grease to it. So like this. Then we're going to walk that up. Let me take that slow. Using that slide. Instead of just landing there, just using a slide. Then you can go to some of those blues licks we just went over. And then we're going to go all the way back up to that highest register in the key of A minor or A blues. And then so I kind of use this octave thing. We're just going to go back and forth. On this one I'm using, I think, the 17th fret here, and then I'm going up to the 20th fret on the high E string. And the rule for octaves when you're starting on the G string is you're going to, instead of go up 2 frets and skip a string, you're going to go up 3 frets and skip a string. So if you're on the 17th fret here, you'll go 1, 2, 3, skip a string. And this is just a real simple back vote. Then just to add a little more flavor into that, I went down to the 2, and then I'll bend it up to that note. So real simple stuff, and you're just using alternate picking. If you watch the picking hand right here, that's something, again, you can practice slow. Another lick you can use all over the place. If you're playing E minor, so again, okay? And then the last phrase that I do in this solo is actually quite a bit of a bear to play. So I've really got to watch where my fingers are going. But it's a technique that I call flutter picking, and it's basically, you're going to do this type of action. So you're just going to go kind of as fast as you can. And then it gives the note a different flavor. So I'll show you the figure starting on the high string, and then it's actually done with octaves. So it's going to go. So it's just a major scale. This walks right down the high E, but it's all done with the pinky, and then the index finger is an octave below on the G string. Again, using that muting technique with our index finger, where we're muting the B, so you can strum all 3, but you're not getting any note out of the B string. So again, just looking right there. That finger is just slightly muting the B string. So the butterfly picking or fan picking is, or flutter picking is like that. Okay, then we're going to walk that down. Now, if you're going to try this, one thing I encourage you to do is pick a finger to focus on, so you'll know what frets you're going on. Because if you're trying to do it between both fingers and look back and forth, you'll tend to mess up the scale, which I have done. So I'm telling you that from experience. So let me show you what this last phrase sounds like. One more time on that. So that's how the fan picking or butterfly picking or whatever you want to call it works on that last phrase, just walking it down. So what I want to do is I'm going to play along with the studio track or the live tracks of Another Hallelujah, and I'll just use some variations of this solo. It's not going to be exactly what I played on the record, but you'll definitely get the general essence of how to use these techniques in this song. So that's the general sense of how to play Another Hallelujah. Right now we're going to dive into a song called All to You, and this is off the All to You live project. There's both a live and a studio version on that project, and it's also on the Best Of project, just the studio version. Well, today we're going to focus mainly on the live version. That's where most of the soloing happens, and if you learn the rhythm part from the live version, if you choose to play the studio version, it applies straight across. So, before we dive into the actual parts of the song, I want to talk a little bit about the groove of this song. It's different than the others we've covered in that it's a shuffle and not a straight feel. Let me just play an example rhythmically with my picking hand. I'll mute my left hand and show you what straight versus shuffle feels like. So this would be a straight feel. So the distance between all the notes rhythmically is the same. So, and you can accent them, differently. And with a shuffle, the distance between the notes isn't the same, which makes it a little more challenging to play. But if you practice it, I think the feel will come. So it goes like this. So you can play it, fast, slow, but shuffles have a whole lot of cool uses. And so I like to use shuffles quite a bit. In fact, on the new project that we just finished, I think half the record are shuffles. So I really like them a lot. I think they have a nice feel. So if you want to just practice for a few moments, you can even pause this and just play with this. And if you have a drum machine, it makes it a lot more fun to play along with. You can just program a straight beat. So just boot, dot, boot, dot, boot, dot. Because the shuffle comes in on the notes that fill in between the eighth notes. So that's kind of the feel of the shuffle, and that's very important to playing this song correctly. The chord voicings that I'm using on this song, I'm just going to take you through them step by step. Sometimes playing a song and making it sound like the recorded version really helps us to use the exact same chord voicings. So I'm going to show you these, and ultimately if you want to change them and use your own, that's fine too. So we start with index finger, 7th fret, A string, and then I'm going to use my pinky to bar the 5, just like that, and the G string. And that's up on the 9th fret. So now sometimes the major third, which is up on the B string 9th fret, will peek in there, and that's okay too. Sometimes I just get just those. Either way is fine. The second chord we're going to use is a straight B major chord, and it roots on the low E string on the 7th fret. Then I'm going to use my ring finger on the 9th fret A string, and then my pinky on the 9th fret D string, and then my middle finger is going to come in on the 8th fret G string, and that's the major third. So we'll strum that. It's a real straightforward chord. So using your pinky to bar like that makes it nice and easy to jump across those two chords. You actually don't have to change your pinky much at all. So then the next chord is a chord voicing I like a lot, and it's a minor 7 chord, just like that. And this roots with my middle finger on the low E 9th fret, then all on the 9th fret, my ring finger on the D string, and my pinky on the G string, and using again that muting technique where we're jumping a string but you're not hearing it. So we're jumping the A string, but my middle finger, if you can see right there, is again muting that A string. And then there's a note that I like to add to these minor 7 chords when I root them on the low E string, and that's this one right here. Just like that. So I'm taking my index finger and I'm putting it on the 7th fret B string. So it gives it a little bit different flavor in terms of the sound of the chord. So if we look at those 3 chords, and then we're going to jump down just again to a straight ahead major chord, just like the B, but you slide it down 2 frets, rooting it in A. All right? So that figure, I'll slow it down, sounds like this. So you can see from the amount of picking that I'm doing and strumming that that shuffle is very, very important to making this feel right. Because if you play it straight like this, it feels totally different. not the same thing. So adding that shuffle in really helps. And on volume 2, I'll dive a bit more into the shuffle and some picking techniques and things that you can do to really make that fun, because you can do some. So you can do some things like that to make the shuffle even more fun. Okay, so the figure we just covered you can use in the intro and also in the turnarounds of the song. Right now we're going to dive into the verse, and again I'll show you how the shuffle applies in the verse. It's a little bit different how it works with the drums, but I'll actually take you a little bit through the drum section and how the guitar works with that. So there's an implied shuffle in the first part of the verse, and it feels very straight, but you can't forget that the shuffle's still in there. So it goes like this. And the drum is playing a straight 4 on the floor kick, which just means a kick drum every quarter note. So all right, but in that you got to remember this is underneath it. That shuffle feel, it's very, very important that you remember that as you're going along, because it goes right back into a shuffle after that. So the chord voicings I'm using are similar to the ones that I just showed you for the intro. Again, that straight E5 where you're barring with the pinky on the 5 and the octave E. And then on this one, we're going to keep that pinky barred just like that, but we're going to move our index finger down there to the low E string on the 7th fret. And then right here, we're going to take our ring finger and move it up to the 9th fret low E, but again, keeping that pinky barred across those 2 notes. And then when we go to the A, instead of trying to do that, we're just going to use the open A and use that palm muting technique that we've talked about before. Just like that. And I like using that palm muting technique because you can really control how much the strings are ringing out. So if you look at the verse phrase, very straight, but don't forget the shuffle. It goes like this. So you can just let those ring out and keep that string. If you use that muting technique, you can just play that without it getting out of control. So again. That kind of is what leads you into that turnaround phrase. So let me play the whole thing. Then if you want to take it one more step further, sometimes you can pick these notes a little bit and it makes a nice flavor for that same section. So let's just take a look at that picking at a slower speed. And one more time on that. So that just adds a little bit more flavor to the verse. I'd like to walk us through the B section of this song, and it's actually a pretty simple thing to do. These are very straightforward chord voicings. So the first chord we're going to use is standard A major. We went over that in the last section, rooting on the 5th fret low E string. And then we're going to move that up. And the only thing we're going to do that's a little bit different on these chords is just let the B and the E string ring out. So just makes a nice sound, a little different chord. And in order to do that, I'll just show you right here. You just want to lift your hand out away from the neck a little bit. So instead of barring, you're just going to let those strings ring out just a little bit. So that's the first chord, and rooting on the B note on the low E string, which is 7th fret, 2nd chord. And then we're going to use that E5, but again, we're going to let those high B and E ring out. All right, just like that. And if you choose to, you can use your pinky to do that bar, but it's a lot tougher to let those strings ring out when your pinky's needing to be lifted up. So I find that that's a lot easier when you want to ring out those top two notes. And you might be seeing a theme in some of these songs that as we're building the part, I want the B section to lift a little bit. And sometimes those ringy notes can really help contribute to that lift feel. So instead of doing the tight, this one's, and I'll show you that picking pattern in just a second, but we're going to pick those notes and let them ring out a little more. So this is third chord. The fourth chord we're going to use is actually a D over E, and I'm going to use, I tend to use it with two fingers. Some people can do it some people do it like that. This one I was doing it like that. So either way you want to do it, whatever's easier for you. Then the next chord is back to that A, letting the high B and E ring out again. And then a real simple move, we're going to switch to a minor here, just like that, and bar that index finger across the 5th fret, keeping the 5 and the octave A here. And when you play that chord, a nice thing to do, you've noticed before with the bends and with the vibrato, I use the other fingers to kind of help to provide strength. When you're doing a bar chord, you can take your middle finger and lay it on top of your index finger and just press down and get a little better grip there. So let me play all those chords in sequence for the B section. So now that we've got the chords down for the B section, let me take you through the picking patterns and also the strumming patterns, so again, reinforcing that shuffle feel. So we're going to start by strumming that first chord open, and then we're going to give it that kind of thing. And I usually use upstrokes when I'm coming down those strings from the top. So you can hear that shuffle pattern again. Bum, 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 ba-bum, bum. So in the back of your mind, through this whole section, you should have this subdivide feel going. Then I'd strum this note, or this chord a little tighter. And if you'll watch on my picking hand right here, I'm really going to mute the strings with my palm when I go ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da, and then you just kind of choke those off a little bit. Try that one more time. And then a straight build on that A minor. And that'll take us to the chorus. Okay, so let's finish this song up by learning the chorus. I'm going to show you the chord voicings again, and you'll see that these are real familiar with the other chord voicings that we've already learned so far for this song. So there's that E5, and this one I'm doing, letting it ring out all the way across the neck. And then letting that second chord, that B major, ring out again. So it sort of forms a sus chord. That's the minor 7. Where we add the 11 on top, and the A major, where we let the B and E again ring out. So it's and in the chorus, we're using all the strumming patterns that we've used to date: muting, shuffle, and those nice open rings. And so let me take you through that rhythmically slow. And I think even though these chord voicings are reasonably basic, this strumming pattern is definitely the most challenging part of this song, making sure that that shuffle really stays locked in. So let me take you through this slowly, and it goes like this. That pause there where I'm using my palm to mute the strings. So right now I'm just going to play just the strumming pattern so you can watch my picking hand and see exactly what it's doing rhythmically, since that's such a big part of this pattern. So let me play that one more time with the chords added, but the same strumming pattern. The next section of the chorus is a walk down, and you're going to root it on the A string from this E5 position. And then you're going to walk these down, but we're going to use that octave technique that we've used on other songs. We're doing that, and just as a reminder, if you're rooting on the A string or the E string, you just skip a string, go up 2 frets for the octave note. One thing I want you to notice that I'm doing is, as we're walking these down, I'm actually going to leave the high E and the B strings ringing as we're climbing down the neck, and you'll notice a little bit of rub from a pitch standpoint when that happens, but it really helps create a cool chord voicing. So we're going to start with that E5 and let the high E and the B ring out. But then when we drop down to the D sharp, let that B and E string ring out, again using the muting technique for the D string where we're not using a note there. We're going to drop down another whole step and go down to C sharp. See how nice the B and the high E make that chord sound? And then go down to the B. Then we're going to go to the A2. Again, letting those ring out. So let's just walk that down so you can hear the context of it. Then we're going to go to an F sharp minor 7, just like that. So it's middle finger, 2nd fret, low E string, ring finger, 2nd fret, D string, and pinky on 2nd fret, G string, muting that A string with the middle finger. And that'll take us to the end of the chorus. So let me play that up to tempo. That takes us to the end of the chorus. All right, now we're going to dive into the guitar solo on All To You. And there's a lot to this, but I'm going to break it down and make it pretty simple for the most part. So one of the key things with this solo is that we're playing over that shuffle feel again. So it's going to feel a little different than playing over a straight feel. And what I'm going to do is, rather than teach you this solo note for note off of the live project, because honestly I don't even know it note for note, that was just a moment that happened in that night, I actually play it differently every time we play it. But the general concept is that you want to play with these techniques and this type of feel, and you can compose a solo of your own. Now we're going to break this solo up into 4 sections. So there's a section that starts down low, which you've seen me do before on Everlasting God. I'll start low on the neck, and that's really the composition piece of the solo, is starting low. I'll move up to the middle section of the neck. I'll move up high to take the energy level up, and then we'll end with the wah section. And when we do the wah section, I'll break that down. I'll show you the sounds that I use and how to incorporate the wah and your hand technique with muting. And sometimes I'll even throw my ring in there, but I'll show you that. And we can unpack exactly how to make that happen. So as we're getting going here, I want to show you a couple of extra things that we haven't gone over yet with some picking technique, and not just using your guitar pick, but using your fingers as well to get some different sounds and different rhythmic patterns. So I'm just going to play for a second just so you can get an idea of the direction that I want to head. So check this out. 1, 2, 3. So you can do some fun stuff if you get those fingers going and kind of pluck these notes. See that? This gets more of a spanky kind of sound to it, and you can really pull them out. The other thing I'm doing on the first section of the solo is I've got my volume pot rolled back to about 5 or 6, and there's a mod you can get done to your guitar called the volume pot mod that is a cap and a resistor, and if you roll your volume pot back a little bit, you won't lose any top end when you do that. And make sure that if you take your guitar to a luthier and he doesn't know what that is, don't have him do that mod to your guitar. Make sure it's somebody who understands what that mod is. It's very simple, but it's got to be done right. So you'll notice that as I've got my volume cranked all the way up, get a good overdrive. But if I back it off about 5 or 6, it'll keep the top end, but it'll clean up a lot. And then when you pluck those notes with your fingers, just gets a different flavor there. So starting at that first section, again, there's 4 pieces. So this section down here, one in the middle of the neck, one at the top of the neck, and then the wah section. So the first lick that I usually play, and I call this an anchor lick because it kind of gets me started, and this one's usually the same, would sound like this on this song. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's a downstroke, upstroke, and I'm doing that rake pick, so really digging into the note. And I'm usually just doing a hammer on. You can pick it if you want to. I just do a hammer on. And then I'm going to do a slide down, just like that, from the 6th fret down to the 4th fret with my ring finger. And then without covering this note for note, again, this is just a general kind of technique you can do, and we covered this on one of the other solos, but we're doing that. It's just kind of a soulful, bluesy. Again, using that middle finger to pick that note. So between that and holding onto the pick, and then sometimes you can even do this, where you'll put the pick between your middle finger and your index finger, and you can use your thumb. That's a little more advanced technique, but so just that bluesy kind of lick. So again, starting from the beginning. Then I'll drop down. Now right there you can see the value of something that would be overlooked, which is the slide. So you can do these, just a little bit of flavor, and I like picking those and raking those, really dig in and give it some good emotion. So again. And then, or you can do. And that's right here, the 6th fret high E string with my pinky, and then the 5th fret B string with my middle finger, or however you want to do it. So that little rundown is 5th fret B string with the middle finger, then you're going to go 6th fret with the ring finger, 4th fret with the ring finger, and then that same slide down that I showed you earlier with the ring finger from the 6th fret to the 4th fret, and then down to the 2nd with the index, and then you're going to end on C sharp on the A string, 4th fret. So, and you can end that, on the E note instead if you want. Maybe bend it up. Now that's kind of the concept for the first section of the solo, for the section 1 of 4. Now in a future volume, I'll cover more on how to link the neck together with different positions playing in the same key. That way you're able to play all over the whole neck while you're doing your improv without having to think too much about it. On this solo, I'm doing that by using 3 primary positions. I'm using this position, and I'm using a position kind of in the middle of the neck, then I'm using a position up toward the top of the neck. So with that in mind, let's move to the second one of those positions for the second part of the solo. I'm going to start this piece by barring the G string and the B string on the 9th fret and just digging in. The other thing too is I'll crank my volume knob up all the way to get a little bit more gain before I step on an overdrive pedal. And then I'll move that up a whole step, and you can either bar this with your ring finger or you can use your ring finger and your pinky. I think I tend to do that more than that just because it's a little easier. So that might sound something more like this when I'm actually playing it in time. And moving up to that bend, that's one of those bends, if you're going to go for it, you got to go for it. And use those other fingers like I've shown you before to support that bend and get a nice deep vibrato. Then we'll go to the high E string, 12th fret. And you can kind of hear that B string grabbing in there sometimes. It's one way to get out of that lick, playing that. And this is kind of a cool old school blues lick, but if you play the 2 here and then do a trill between the root and 1/2 step above that, just like that, you can go. Again, watch my pick hand so you can see what I'm doing. So that's a hammer-on and a pull-off. And then you can walk that phrase down in many different ways. So depending on your skill level, you could do a simple version of that. Or maybe not even do the trills down below. That'd be a real simple version. And if you do that with enough emotion and the right feel, that'll get the same point across. So let me play both of those kind of in context. So 1, 2, 3. So that's one way to do the more simple version. The more complex version, again, in time, sounds like this. 1, 2, 3. So I'm including that flat 5 in that descending run. And if you take that flat 5 right there, which is the G here, and you just bend it up as you're walking it up, it creates a very cool feel. So instead of just straight, bend that G up a little bit. You can grab it with your middle finger if you want, just for that feel. So those are just some general techniques that I'm using in that section without being too specific that will help me to compose that middle part. As we move up to the high part, there's a spot where, as I'm coming out of that second section, I like to do this, one of those flutter picks again. And this is, relatively basic to do with the exception of doing that fast picking, but it's just this position. So I've got 13th fret, ring finger, G string, and then 12th fret with the middle finger on the B string. And I'm just sliding that up a half step. But I decided to pick it fast, give it a different flavor, so. Then we're going to jump up to that third section with this high note that just takes it over the top. The other thing you'll notice that happens there is the drums kick into a 4 on the floor shuffle groove, which is real cool. So just got that, it just gives a nice pulse to it. So the whole thing takes a lift. So as we're coming out of this, the drums are still, on the second section, the drums are still doing the, and then I hit that riff coming out of that. While the drums are just going for it, and the bass line changes. Just the whole thing grows a little bit, so the guitar's got to play a part of that, and I thought taking it up there will do that. So now that's another thing that's a neat thing to do, is if you take that bend, you can push that one up. And I think we did that on another solo, but again, you just twist your finger the other way, try to get that up there. And this is the same run, actually, that we did down here. But we're just going to do it up the octave, and it's a little faster, so. So this section sounds like this up to speed. Now I'm doing a lot of alternate picking and some faster stuff in there, but again, that's stuff that I tend to play a little differently each time I do it, just depending on the night. So again, I would encourage you not to be too fixed on playing it note for note, but just trying to get the general essence and then playing within your skill set. Now in the second half of that third section, it's comprised of 2 chords, and then there's just a rhythmic strumming pattern that happens. So the first chord there is on the 11th fret D string with your index finger, and then on the 12th fret with your ring finger and your pinky on the B string and E string, respectively. Then the second chord is going to happen on the 16th fret with your index finger on the D string, 17th fret with your middle finger on the B string, and the 18th fret with your pinky, or you can use your ring finger, whatever you choose. So those 2 chords. So this is the strumming pattern that goes along with that. It's a little bit tricky, but I'll slow it down and try to simplify this as much as I can. Now when you do this part, you really got to dig into it and really sell it. So. And there's a lick that comes right here that's kind of fun to do, but it's, you're going to go back and forth here, but you're going to bend the bottom one. So it's. And one more time, a lot slower. But then you're going to have those bends just to give it that extra bit of flavor. So. And then we're going to go back to those 2 chords. And I think on the recorded version, right there, I do something like this. So it's something like that. I've been doing something different live lately. I'll show you what that is. So we'll go. So the idea behind that is using those little slides, incorporating the flat 5, some alternate picking. This is kind of a cool. little trill like that. Adds a nice extra flavor to it. So what I want to do now is I want to take you through that solo all the way up to the wah section. I'm going to play you what I would do using these techniques, and then I'll do one more using a more simple version.
I'm giving it all to you. Giving it all to you.
So one last thing before we get to the wah section. Right at the end of that section, I'm going to do this technique, which is just those octaves, but this time I'm going to pick them with my middle finger and my thumb. So the pattern, note-wise, is and again, you can do your own thing there if you want to do your own thing. So one more time on that pattern. I'm going to play a solo that doesn't require any speed, but just bending and vibrato. For those of you who go, I'm just not quite there on the speed yet, I want to show you that you can play a solo that's full of feeling and emotion, and that still gets the point across without having to do all the fast stuff.
Giving it all to you.
Okay, so this last part of the solo section is definitely my favorite thing to play in the solo. It's just a lot of fun. So some of you have heard this wah technique, and where I play a rhythmic pattern and then I use the wah to kind of accentuate some of the notes. And the way that this technique came about was we were jamming at a church one night and just having a great time. And the jam went on so long that I actually just ran out of stuff to play. So I was looking for something new to do on the guitar that I hadn't tried before. And so I just cranked up the volume. I had my pickup selector switch on the bridge pickup. I had my tone pot wide open just to make it nice and bright. And I just reached around like this and muted the strings with my left hand. And I just started to play it like a drum. And some of you might not know this, but that was my first instrument, was playing drums. And I still like playing drums today. But guitar is what I ended up with, and I love it. So I'm always trying to work in something rhythmic. And you might have noticed that even on the rhythm parts of this song, just things that are real rhythmic and that are driven by drum grooves. So this is one of those techniques. So I started to play these rhythmic patterns, muting the strings with my ring finger and pinky on my left hand, and just keep my hand nice and flat right here. Because if you have it, it doesn't work as well if it's not hitting flat. So you want to hit it nice and flat like that. And this is the idea. So you can kind of see where that started. And so I started doing that. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But it wasn't going anywhere for me. So it started as a good concept. And I just looked at my pedal board and went, what do I got? I'm just going to look at my tools. And I thought, let me try the wah pedal. So when I hit the wah pedal and I started moving it as I was playing that rhythm, it took on a whole new life. And it was quite cool. So check this out. So you can get real creative with this and come up with your own rhythmic patterns. Now, one thing I got to say before we go further in this technique is you got to be able to kind of sit at a table and just play a good rhythmic pattern with your hands. That's the absolute key to this technique. Because really, in essence, it's just muting the strings here, hitting the strings flat right here with your hand, and then moving the wah pedal. But again, it's that rhythmic pattern that really makes it work. So you might want to start with something simple, and you can practice this just on a table or anywhere you are, just even on your legs, just playing a nice rhythmic pattern. And then if you want to do it exactly how you're going to do it, even hold these three fingers down and do. And that'll help you develop that rhythmic piece of the pie. So, and then go back and maybe start without the wah pedal first. Get those three fingers muting the strings, and I do it, somewhere between the 9th and 12th fret. And then I'm usually hitting, if you're on a Strat, it's right between the bridge pickup and the middle pickup. Right there. So. You can do something even more simple. Then let's add the wah pedal in. And then I started adding triplets and different things like that, so you kind of get into this type of thing. And one thing you can see is I'm laying my finger down to kind of mute this to make it even tighter sounding on some of the phrases. So as I'm opening the wah pedal, I'm lifting that finger up. So you can play with some different things that'll work for you, but the sky's the limit on this technique. And there's another thing I stumbled across. This was after we recorded the All To You project, where I was doing this one night in a live setting, and this happened. And I started hearing that little metal sound, and I was going, what is that? And I realized it was my ring. And I don't know if you wear rings or not, but I've got a ring that my wife gave me on this hand, and she gave me this one too. But so I started using that as a sound effect and kind of just rub that on the string. So you can kind of get some cool effects with that. Sometimes it lines up better than others, so try that one more time. So you can do all kinds of fun stuff with this. All right, so before I play this with the live tracks, and again, just muting the solo from that night, there's one thing I do at the end of the solo, and all you're going to do is just rub your hand on the strings like that. So by itself, sounds kind of corny, but when you open the wah pedal up and do that, it creates a pretty cool effect. So. Even if you don't do it fast. So we'll do that at the very end of the wah section. So let me play this with the live tracks and you can check it out. So that's how the wah technique in Alta U is done. Have fun. Over the past several years, I've gotten a lot of requests to talk more in detail about my guitars and my gear setup. So today I'm going to do that, but I'm just going to give you a basic overview of the stuff that I use. I'll definitely cover the gear that I've used to shoot this volume, and then I'll take you through all the stuff that I use to play live. Also know this, in a future volume, I'm going to do an expansive tone DVD that will cover several different guitars, a lot of different amps, pedals, and show you how to mic amps, and just in general, how to look for a good tone for yourself, even if you don't choose to use the gear that I use. Well, the first step in unpacking my particular sound is to look at the guitar. Now this guitar is just a good old-fashioned Fender Stratocaster. Now this one was built by the Fender Custom Shop, and it's a 1957 reissue, and so it has a V-neck on it, maple neck, and fingerboard, as you can see. And then I've replaced the pickups with DiMarzio Virtual Vintage pickups, and this is an Area 61 in the bridge, and Area 58 in neck and middle. And I love these pickups because they basically sound like vintage Strat pickups, but they're really quiet, so they don't make any noise. I don't get any weird hums or buzzes out of them. And then I've got my guitar wired up in a real specific way, and it helps me do all the things that I've showed you in this volume. One of those things, as I alluded to earlier, is a thing called a volume pot mod. And what that allows me to do is as I turn my volume down to clean up my sound, I don't lose top end. So I can kind of demonstrate that for you again. But this is full up. And then if you just back that volume down, you still get a nice top end in the guitar. And you're able to clean that sound up. So it gives me a lot of variety without having to step on a pedal, and I like that a lot. So I can kind of do. Now being a worship leader, that comes in very handy because I don't have to I call it pedal dance, and I don't have to pedal dance to get a lot of different sounds out of my guitar. I can just do it with the pickup selection and with the volume pot. Another thing that comes in handy on my Strat is that on the tone pot, I've got it wired directly to my bridge pickup so that I can roll that tone off. And we talked about that again in an earlier solo. But I'm going to show you how that works more in detail here. It's a little darker sound. You can brighten it up. So sometimes on rhythm parts, I'll want that cranked all the way up. And I've got a song called Everybody Praise the Lord. And when I'm playing the rhythm part down low, I leave that tone pot wide open. Just gives it that nice spank and kind of. Then when I go up to do a solo, I want to roll that tone back so that it's nice and singy, a little rounder, a little fatter sounding. So you'll see me all the time if you watch me play live. I'll be fiddling with these knobs all the time just to continue to tweak the sound of the guitar, because I'm a firm believer that the guitar is where good tone starts. I've used some form of Line 6 pod unit on every project that I've done to date, and on the last few there's actually no mic'd up guitars at all, which shocks a lot of people because I still get a lot of guys who come up and say, how do you get your sound? And one of the things that people struggle with is when I tell them what I use, their ear tells them it's good, but their brain tells them it's impossible. But it's possible. So I want to take you through the unit that I use today and a couple that I've used in the past. And some of these, you can actually use the same patches on them, and they really sound identical. This unit that I'm using to record this volume is a Pod X3 Live. And the reason I use this particular unit is it's lightweight, which means I can fly 2 of them and not go over the 50-pound weight limit for airlines. It also has metal push buttons that are easy for my foot to find when I'm trying to do whatever pedal dancing I have to do live. So this is a great unit. My patches are available online on my website at www.lincolnbrewster.com. If you click on the Gear tab, you can go there and download these, and you can put them in a Pod XT, XT Live, X3, or X3 Live, and use them and tweak them to match your guitar. Some of these patches I'll actually change a little bit depending on what guitar I'm using, just to kind of fine-tune them. But my main patch that I use is patch 18B. That's the one I've been recording with for a long time, and it's a Variac Plexi Marshall model. And then I've got a just a little bit of a stomp boost in front of it whenever I need a little extra gain for playing leads. And I just use a basic digital delay model with a little bit of the top end rolled off, so it's not quite as bright as the original tone. And that's what makes up the basic sound that I use. So when it's dry with no delay, it sounds like this. You go to the neck, you get this. It's just a nice basic tone. It's also modeling miking up greenback 25 Celestians, 25-watt Celestians with an SM57 off-axis. So again, those are things you can go through on this when you load this into your pod and kind of check it out and see all the tweaks that I've made. On this tone, I've also got a basic delay, and I can kick that delay on, and that's about what it does. It's just a real basic sound, and I leave this on for most things that I play, and I just find when there's a little bit of delay on the guitar, it tends to sit in a mix a little bit better. So especially when I'm playing solos, I like it to sit back in there where it doesn't sound too in your face, but it blends in with the mix, and you can still turn it up. It's nice and clear, but it blends in and sounds real singy and smooth. So I'll show you a couple of examples, one without delay, one with. So that's just dry. Here's a little delay. Gives it a little bit of space. So that's the basic setup of my tone. And again, that's something that you can upload into your pod and check it out. Play with it and customize it to fit what you do. One of the other patches that I use is 18C. And 18C is the same amp model that I've got in 18B, but it's a cleaner setup, so the gain knob's backed off just a little bit, and then I've got a little bit of reverb on it. And so I use this for songs like Surrender and Another Hallelujah for the beginning, where the guitar needs to be a little bit cleaner and have a little bit of reverb on it, just, for fun. This one too, if you crank the volume up and really dig in, you can get it to break up pretty nicely. So this really does, at least to me, it responds very similar to a real amp. And one of the things that I do because of that is I use a Boss overdrive in front of it called an OD3, and I've also got a Boss tuner called the TU2, which is probably my favorite tuner on the planet. But I love both these pedals, and I use the OD3 basically as again, similar to the Stomp, just a little bit of overdrive in front of the pedal. Now the way that I set my OD3 is my level is set straight up at 12 o'clock, the tone is straight up at 12 o'clock, and then the drive is all the way down. And I do that because I don't want it to add distortion, I just want it to add some gain going into the front end of the pod, which is simulating a mic'd up amp. So if you check out these controls, those are set just like I said, and when you kick that on, you'll hear the impact that it has on the sound. That's with it on. Let me play that same lick with it off. And with it on again. It adds a really nice color to the sound, gives you some nice sustain, but not too distorted. So that comes in very, very handy for certain settings. One other patch that I use live is 18D, and I really only use that for Let the Praises Ring. And the reason I use that patch is because the stomp button is programmed to a different pedal model when I kick it on. It's actually modeling a Chandler tube driver, which gets a real unique distortion sound. And so for Let the Praises Ring, I've talked about when we went over the solo, is dropping that tone pot down, and it can be down to 4 or 5, and then I'll kick that stomp on, and I've got a lot of the top end rolled off that particular pedal, so you get a real kind of violin-esque type sound. It's very mid-rangey and a lot of gain. So this is what that sounds like. If you take that stomp off, it thins out quite a bit. So you hear that when I kick it on, that mid-range pops up. And then having the extra gain gives you a little more forgiveness when you're playing a pattern like that. Makes it sound a little bit smoother. So here's what that patch sounds like. There's two more patches that I'd like to take you through before we're done with this section. One of them is 17D, and this is a patch again that will show up when you upload my patches into your pod. This does the delay technique that I showed you on Let the Praises Ring in the verse, and it's got that. And all you have to do is tap in the tempo of the song that you're going to do. One other way to do it is double click the delay button real fast and the delay screen will show up. You just put in the tempo of the song and then you set it on dotted eighth note, and that'll give you this triplet delay. But the key to this technique, remember, is that your drummer's got to play to a metronome and he's got to be able to stay with the metronome. The last patch that I'd like to draw your attention to is patch 16C, and this is a great patch for doing swells and creating textures behind the music. So you might have an acoustic guitar, maybe a piano, drums, and bass, and then you can come in and really fill some nice space with a patch like this. So I'll sometimes just do these swells, and all you're going to do is just push up the volume after you strum the guitar. So turn your guitar volume all the way up. I like to go in the middle pickup. You can do it with these two, or actually any of them for that matter, but I prefer the middle pickup by itself, and it sounds like this. So it adds a real nice texture in many different scenarios you can use this in, but I love this patch. It's very fun to play with. One of the things you'll notice that I do live is I've actually got an amp on stage, and what I use that amp for is actually just for some stage volume. Sometimes you'll see me take one of my in-ear monitors out, and that's so I can hear my amp going, even though it's coming out of the PA. And believe it or not, when you're standing on stage, even if you're playing through a giant PA, it's really hard to hear it. You can feel it, but it's hard to hear any detail when you're standing on stage. So I like to have an amp just to kind of shake my legs a little bit and really get the feel of the guitar coming through a real amp. But what you're hearing in the house is not a microphone in front of a speaker, it's the direct out from the Pod X3 Live. So the Pod X3 Live has XLR outputs, and that's what we use, and we take those straight to the PA, and always sounds real cool. The other thing that I do is I take the live out, the 1/4-inch output on it, and I run that to the effects return on, say, a Marshall half stack or a Vox AC30. I like using the half stack because it has more bottom end and just shakes a little bit better. And then I'll roll a lot of the top end off, that way I don't kind of smash the people in the front rows. So one of the things you can do on your setup is if you hold the output button down, you can select the volume knob, the master volume knob, to only control the 1/4-inch outputs. That way, whenever I plug my X3 Live in with the XLR output, I get a consistent volume day to day, so it always stays the same. But when I use my master volume, I can dial how much gain I'm sending into the amp that I'm using on stage. So if I'm using an AC30, for example, I want to dial that back a little bit, because if I push the front end of the amp too hard, it actually adds distortion on top of this, and I don't want that. I want the amp to stay clean and just give me good, clean volume. Also, if I want to drive the effects return on a half stack a little bit more to get more volume, I can easily do that from the master volume on the front of the Pod X3 Live without changing what goes to the PA, and our sound guy loves that feature. One other very cool option you can use to get a cool tone, especially in a recording environment, is using a program that Line 6 makes called Gearbox. And Gearbox basically is a pod, but in software form that you can use as a plugin. And I use DigiDesign Pro Tools, so it works great with that program. And I've actually done a lot of recording with this plugin, and I think it sounds great. It really sounds exactly like the Pod X3 or any of the Pod XT or Beyond series units. And it's the same software engine. And the really cool part is that you can actually use the same presets that you dial up in your Pod X3 in Gearbox and vice versa, so you can transfer them back and forth. So after you record, you can just take your patches, load them into your unit, and take it on the road, which is very, very cool. So I'm going to show you a sound that I've got dialed up. I basically just have taken these patches and pulled them right into Gearbox, and Gearbox sounds like this. If you take a look at the software on the screen, you've got some great options with things that you can do. So all these functions here are automatable, which means when I'm mixing, I can actually change these on the fly. And one of the things that I've learned to do is just record my pickups, and then when I play back my tracks, my pickups play back, and this plugin processes my pickups. That way I can change my tones all the way up until I'm ready to print my final mix. One of the other things you can do is click on, say, speaker cabinet. You can look at your mic type and move the mic around, change how far it is away from the cabinet, deal with all your EQs, and then it's got all the effects and all those types of things on there where you can see them in a nice graphical interface that shows up on the computer screen rather than looking at it on the floor. So this works great for a recording environment, and when I open my sessions with my songs in there, all these patches and screens come up just as I saved them the last time. Well, for those of you who are curious about what kind of picks I use, here's a picture of the pick that I use. It's a Dunlop Tortex 60mm pick. You can just say, I want to use the orange ones, and these are it. So they come in different colors depending on their thickness. And I love these picks. They tend to work really well for the variety of things that I do with strumming and lead playing. Now, I used to play Jazz 3 picks, and I liked those a lot too. They were very nice and pointed on the end, which gave you a lot of accuracy and a lot of clean sound, crisp sound for the lead playing. But for me, they weren't quite as good for strumming. And being a worship leader, I've got to do stuff like that a lot more now. So this is a great pick for a variety of settings. As far as string choice goes, I use GHS boomers and I use 9-gauge strings. Now, string gauge is something that is very personal. It does change the sound a little bit, but I would encourage you most to play a string that feels comfortable in your hand. I've got relatively small hands, even though my fingers look long when I'm playing, just because they're skinny, but they're not very long. So I tend to use strings that are lighter gauge so I can bend them a lot easier. Otherwise, my hands tend to get tired. So the days of using 10s for me, I think, are over. But 10s might work great for you. So whatever works, that's what you ought to use. Well, hopefully this brief overview of my gear has been helpful to you. And if you're not happy with the sound that you're getting now, hopefully this will help you come up with a tone that you're really pleased with. Remember this about tone. It should be something that when people hear it, they enjoy the sound of it, and it should also be inspiring for you to play on it. It should feel great and make you play that much better. And until we get a chance to do an entire volume dedicated to tone, where I'll take you through all different types of amps and guitars and pedals and how to set them up to get a good sound, I just want to encourage you to keep it simple. Getting a great sound doesn't have to be a complex thing, and it shouldn't be overwhelming. If you just keep it to the basics, I think you'll find a sound you'll be real happy with. I want to say thank you for joining me on this DVD volume. I hope it's been a blessing for you. I know I've had a great time breaking down these parts and showing them to you. And I want to leave you with a couple of encouragements as you continue down the road with your guitar playing. One thing that's been a big help for me over the years is to make sure that I love playing guitar. And I really, really do enjoy it. That's something that I still look forward to. I still feel like I'm 9, 10 years old when I pick up my guitar. And I think that that type of joy comes out in your playing. And I've heard comments over and over that people say, hey, I can hear your heart and your passion through your playing. So I really want to encourage you to make sure that you love it as you continue. Also, I believe in being somebody of purpose, and I just want to explain to you where I'm coming from when it comes to playing guitar. I don't believe in music as a platform to show off any gift. I just believe that it's something that is a means to a bigger end. And when I play guitar solos or any of the stuff that I do with writing songs or singing, none of the gifts that I have really anything to do with. I've just done some practicing, but anything I do, I give all the credit to God, and He's who I live for. And so I just want to encourage you as you look at your life and why you play your instrument, make sure that you've got a strong sense of purpose in what you're doing. And I think maybe it's that gives me my truest sense of joy in using music for the glory of God. So I'm really grateful to be able to do this type of thing, and I hope that future volumes will continue to be a blessing for you as you continue on your musical journey. So God bless you, and thanks a lot.